Hans, I feel like actually it's changed over time. And the reason is that I think what the cellist that I was when I was 13, of course, is very different from the cellist I am now. And I think overall, Hans has not only been just a cello teacher for me, he's been like my musical dad.
Most nerve-wracking performance experience? Welcome to another episode of the Whole Note Podcast. I'm your host, Shin-Young Kim. What's better than one cello, you may ask? How about four? Our guest today, Sydney Lee, would certainly agree. Sydney is an award-winning cellist and founder of the Galvin Cello Quartet. The Galvin Cello Quartet captured the silver medal of the 2021 Chamber Music Competition and is currently on the roster of the Konzerthaus Berlin. As a soloist, Sydney captured first prize at the 2022 Washington International Competition and second prize at the Classic Strings International Competition. A passionate educator, Sydney was recently appointed to the faculty of the McDuffie Center for Strings in Macon, Georgia. She shared with us about her work with the quartet, her life as a teacher at McDuffie, and her many summers spent at the Meadowmount School of Music. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode and would like insight into the lives of other incredible artists, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We hope you enjoy. Thanks. All right. Hi, thanks, Sydney, so much for having us here today at your home, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited because I've seen your performance videos on YouTube for a while now, and I'm a huge fan of your playing and your work, so I'm really excited to talk to you about your multifaceted life in music.
It's so great to be here.
So getting right into it, you're the founder of the Galvin Cello Quartet, which has been doing really well and is an award-winning group. Can you, as a founder, can you tell us and share with us a little bit about how this group originated? And did you know from the beginning that the group would get as big as it has?
So it's interesting. We started during COVID. This was around the time that I started my master's at Northwestern University. And I actually had a chamber music class requirement to fulfill. And at the time, because it was COVID, I had no opportunity to meet the other instrumentalists. But the cello studio was pretty tight-knit, and I knew a lot of them from my summers at Meadowmount, where my teacher, Hans Jansen, teaches over the summer. And so because I had done cello quartets and ensembles in the past, like during my high school years, and actually a little bit in my undergrad years as well, I thought, well, what better time than now to do a cello ensemble? And so that's how it kind of got started. And it's funny because initially it wasn't as well received, and our chamber music director was like, I'll allow this if you enter the Fischoff National Chamber Music Competition. And at the time we were like, oh, that's crazy though. We've never played together as a group. I mean, we're friends, but like the three of us were in Evanston, and Luis was in Brazil at home. And so it's a pretty crazy story because we called up Luis and, because obviously the three of us were in Evanston, and then Luis, we called him, and of course he wasn't expecting it, but he came over to Evanston after quarantining in Mexico and Evanston, and then we finally got to rehearsing. And we rehearsed for 11 days together and recorded all that music for the very first time together. And it was a crazy experience, but it really bonded us. And we did pretty well, I would say, at the competition. And I think after that we realized, well, we don't want to stop here. We were having so much fun. And so that's when we applied for CAG and
Concert Artist
Guild. And, I guess ever since then, we've just continued to love playing together, and we really believe in what the cello quartet can do. And so we're excited to take it to new heights. And it's been a really great experience.
Yeah, and I'm curious, because I'm always curious about this with every group, how did the name originate?
So we were going through a couple of different options, but I think we ultimately decided on Galvin because that's the name of the main recital hall at Northwestern. It's the very beautiful one with the view of Chicago skyline.
The lake, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. So, and the reason why we named it after that was because that was the first hall that we recorded everything from Fischoff together. Sure. So it was like our first moments together as a group, and so I think because of those sentimental reasons, we decided on Galvin.
It's great, and I'm curious, just logistically speaking, because for string quartets in general, one of the biggest challenges is intonation, obviously. How does that collide with 4 cellists? Do you think it makes it easier or more difficult because it's the same instrument?
I think, well, for us, we do tune each string, so it's equal temperament.
Sure.
So I think that helps with the intonation. But yeah, it can get a little bit tricky because I think what's tricky about cello quartet is just the balance, actually, because we're all within similar range.
Right.
That's always been the trickiest thing, I think, about the cello quartet. But honestly, it's cool because we can do everything that the violinists and violists do.
Yeah.
So it's been, it's pretty awesome in that sense.
Right. And it's interesting because I feel like what's unique about cello, like for us as cellists, is we're like the one instrument that really loves doing ensembles with like other cellists. I feel like other string players, it's like they don't really do that. So it's kind of it's nice that you guys are kind of like these torch bearers for like hopefully future cello quartets. So.
Hopefully, we're hoping that they're more budding cello quartets.
Yeah. And I mean, because I know Hans was very, and I'm sure he still is, very passionate about cello ensembles in general. So I'm assuming that had a role in the formation of the group, maybe.
I mean, he's been so supportive of Galvin, and I don't think, we could be where we are without him. Right. So definitely.
Yeah. Well, moving forward a little bit. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you go about programming a concert for a cello quartet, and if there are specific arrangers that you guys kind of go to, or if you arrange your own music, or?
Yeah, so I would say it's a mixture of things. So in terms of programming, we call it, it's kind of like a menu. You have an appetizer, a main course, a dessert. So we like to have a mixture of those types of works. It also really depends on what the venue wants. Sometimes if they, let's say, want a series of short pieces, we'll do that. But generally, I think we follow a little bit of like appetizer, main course, dessert in terms of programming. But when it comes to arrangements, we do a mixture of finding things online, arranging things ourselves. And actually, one of the biggest things for us is that we're looking to commission works. And that's part of what we want to do. We want to expand the cello quartet repertoire through these commissions. And specifically, we want to find composers who share similar backgrounds to us. So actually, last October, when we made our debut at Merkin Hall, we performed a piece by Zhou Tian, who's a Chinese-American composer. And at the time, actually see how our former member, who's from China, and Haddon, who's also Chinese-American. So it fit that. And actually this coming November, we're performing a commissioned work by a Brazilian composer. So yeah, we've been, this has been something that's been in the works. And this is something that we're definitely looking to expand and pursue continually.
Yeah, and just going back to like short pieces, you guys have like the most ridiculous rendition of the Pauper Elfenton on YouTube. And it's just like everyone gets a turn in terms of all the fun little moments. And remind me, who's the arranger for that? Was that?
So that one we got on Opus Cello, I believe. So they have a lot of different arrangements. But actually we kind of rearranged that arrangement also, because a lot of times with these arrangements we found that the first cello has everything and then not as much for the other three. And I think part of what makes the cello quartet so unique is that we do everything from solo to chamber and
Right.
everything in between. And we want to showcase these different strengths that each individual can bring.
Yeah.
And so what we did with the Elfentanz was we split the first cello part and we each took different parts of the first part and we kind of mixed it around a little bit. Yeah. So I think that's what has been kind of fun about being in a cello quartet.
Yeah. And I know one person that really arranges a lot of cello quartet music is Blaise Desjardins, who's the principal cellist of the Boston Symphony. So have you guys reached out to him directly about cello quartet music, or other arrangers too?
Currently no, because I guess we've been able to find a good amount of repertoire. And I think most of it is that with the new works that we're bringing in, I think it's given us enough on our plate for now. But maybe in the future,
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so talk to us a little bit more about like the actual nuts and bolts of like rehearsal. Like, how do you guys approach rehearsing, and is it any different from other chamber music settings, or is it more or less the same, you would say?
I would say it's pretty similar. I guess a rundown of our rehearsal. I think we definitely, because here is the one thing is that we do have so much repertoire because for regular string quartets, each string quartet is a good like 30, maybe 40 minutes. Sure. But because our repertoire is not quite like that, we do a lot of, I would say it really depends on how new the work is for us too. But if the work is pretty new, then we'll focus a lot of attention on that. But we also, because we have just a lot more pieces in terms of like the number, we always have to revisit those and work on those as well. So it comes with a lot of pre-planning on what we need to focus on, what needs more work. And I guess similar to any other chamber ensemble, from there we kind of see what needs more work and stuff like that.
And would you say that all four of you guys are musically on the same page, more or less, or do you guys all have very different ideas?
I think generally, like, we have similar lines of thought, but if there are differences, we discuss them, and we kind of come to a nice middle ground, I would say.
I just can't imagine, like, traveling as a group, as a cello quartet, because I'm sure you guys are all like taking up a row on the plane. So
we definitely get some good amount of stairs, especially when we fly.
What can you even do like road trips? Like you would have to get a pretty big car.
We do. Actually, we mainly do road trips.
Oh, really?
I mean, because it depends on the location, but what we try to do is if we have to fly, then we'll fly to one location. We'll try to group a good number of concerts around that, and then so we would drive to each of those in between and then fly back.
Okay.
So that way it's kind of a mixture. But traveling is quite tricky. I think we've mastered how to lay out the car. It's a little bit like Tetris. Right. But I think we've kind of mastered that. And of course, we definitely need a minivan. It won't fit into like a full size.
Right.
So we usually travel with a minivan. And we play Tetris a little bit, and we figured out a good system that works for us. But it's, I think actually the road trips, sometimes they are quite long. But it's definitely a time for us to really bond. Because in rehearsals, obviously, we're very work intensive and we're focusing on just the music making, that it forces us to really decompress and just really get to know each other. So it's great, actually.
And outside of these road trips, what else do you guys do as a group to bond and get closer?
I would say in general, well, actually, you've probably heard we have a new member.
James.
So we're still getting to know him.
Sure.
But in the past, I would say, even when we are taking these road trips, when we have some downtime, we would do an activity together.
Sure.
We generally have meals together. So we definitely carve out time to just get to know each other as a group, because I think it really helps with the music making.
Yeah.
It's not, I think when we get to know each other's personalities, then it definitely influences the way we make music together and how we work together.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of it definitely is a lot of fun, but it's also, we really get to know each other's styles on a personal and musical level that way.
And I would imagine that being in a group, especially with people that you are close with, is very fulfilling both musically and personally, because as many of the listeners would probably know, music is such an isolated endeavor where you're by yourself a lot. And so to be able to be with your friends and to make music in that kind of intense but yet rewarding environment, I'm sure is very fulfilling for all of you. So
I think so. And I think that is something that makes Galvin unique too, because we were friends first, even before becoming a group.
Right.
And it's different to work. Of course, it's lovely to work professionally as well, and we are working professionally as well. But just the kind of bond that we have because we're friends, it brings it to another level, I would say.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so moving forward a little bit, you were recently a recipient of the Gurrena Fellowship, is that right?
Yes.
From the Meadowmount School of Music. When did you first start going to Meadowmount, and how do you think your summers spent there helped shape your work and life as a musician?
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's a lot to unpack there. Okay. Well, I started going there in 2010 when I was 13. And I've been there for many summers. But, actually, I think in general, Meadowmount has just really strengthened me. And it's been a place where I think it's pretty safe to say I would call it my second home, my summer home. Meadowmount, as I'm sure you've heard, the conditions are pretty rough. And there are a lot of bugs. The Wi-Fi, actually, when I first started going, there was no Wi-Fi even. Now there's Wi-Fi on campus, but there was no Wi-Fi.
Okay. Less distraction.
Even less distraction. I mean, even still, it's hard to be distracted because there's really nothing there. There are not that many restaurants. There are not many activities. I mean, Meadowmount, of course, creates activities, but just in terms of the location, you're really in this pastoral, very scenic Adirondack Mountains. So it really gives you the space to focus and practice, which was, I guess, the purpose of Meadowmount. But, I think just growing up in the suburbs of the East Coast, and I think going to Meadowmount at first, it was really tough because the conditions are not easy, especially when you're younger.
Right.
And I think it really just gave me the space to think solely about music. And it gave me the time to really grow cellistically and become more efficient and proficient with my craft. So it really, I felt like Meadowmount was where I really grew to become so comfortable with the instrument. And it made me love it even more, honestly, just because I had the time to really delve into the instrument so deeply. So it was an amazing experience in that sense, but it was tough. It definitely, I feel like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I really lived through that for many summers. So,
for those that might not know, talk to us about a typical day for a student at Meadowmount.
Oh, okay. So it was a little different for me actually because I was off campus. But for those who are on campus, you practice from 8:30 to 12:30 with 10-minute breaks each hour. And then you have, of course, chamber rehearsals, lessons, and then another hour of practice from 5 to 6. And these 5 hours of practice are mandatory. And they take away your devices. And actually being off campus, it was not much different. If anything, it was actually more because I was really isolated. I didn't even get to socialize that much.
Sure.
So it was a lot of practicing. And it was very regimented, and Meadowmount was very strict about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's why you improve so much. There is that saying for Meadowmount that what you get done in those 7 weeks is what you would get done during the year, like entirely.
Yeah.
So that's how much you really grow in one summer at Meadowmount.
Very condensed, like accelerated work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and so when you were off campus, was it still like, did they make you come to the school at a certain time and you had to still like practice, or how did that work?
No, I mainly just practiced at home, and then I would come to school for lessons and for concerts.
Okay. So they trusted you to practice on your own. Well, which I'm sure you did. So.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. They kind of expect that you would be practicing at home.
Interesting.
But you would think that off campus the conditions are much better, but they're actually not. So I still experienced a lot of bugs, and
was it pretty humid?
It was very humid. Yeah, and during that like time of year, it gets really humid, very hot. There's no AC.
Yeah.
So I survived on fans.
Yeah.
Honestly, looking back, I'm not sure how I did it, because like now I don't know if I could do the same. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, and then how regular were the student concerts that they held for the students to perform?
It's quite frequent, actually. It's Sunday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay.
Of every week.
Okay.
And actually, recently they started also adding concerts on Thursday.
Okay.
For faculty.
Wow. Okay.
And which is great because it gives some students actually opportunities to play chamber music with faculty members.
Yeah.
So that's been a great addition for the summer.
Yeah. Well, and I know Meadowmount in recent years has had the violin channel live streaming a lot of their concerts. So I'm sure that's even more motivation if they needed to practice for the students.
Definitely. And I think it brings more awareness of all the amazing things that Meadowmount is doing to the public.
Yeah.
Because I feel like without it, it's quite isolated, actually.
Yeah.
So it's great that Meadowmount is being featured on the violin channel.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even in like the Wayback Machine, like of the early 2010s or before, like I remember YouTube or Meadowmount would post on YouTube like students' performances, and it was like VHS quality level in terms of the but I mean, it was just like some of the most incredible playing. And so I'm sure for you being there in person and like seeing that on a regular basis probably further helped develop your musicianship. And,
Definitely.
Yeah. So moving forward a little bit, we mentioned him a little bit already. You studied, or I guess still are studying kind of. Yeah. You're studying with Hans Jensen at Northwestern, and I'm guessing you first met him at Meadowmount.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. So you're wrapping up your DMA with him at Northwestern. He's a big stickler on intonation. He wrote a whole book on it, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners have already heard about. How has he shaped your perspective on intonation and just your overall outlook on music?
Ooh. Hans, I feel like actually it's changed over time. And the reason is that I think what the cellist that I was when I was 13, of course, is very different from the cellist I am now. And I think overall, Hans has not only been just a cello teacher for me, he's been like my musical dad. And in the very beginning, when I first met him at 13 years old, he was, of course, very big on intonation, and he, I think, was the one teacher that really shaped my perception of technique, and he really solidified a lot of the technique that I had been working on, and he made me improve so much in that area of cello playing. Actually, like my first summer, I remember he had a competition of 5 proper etudes, and I had not done that many etudes before.
Yeah.
And it was tricky because I hadn't done that many etudes at that point in my life, and I had not done scales that intensely before either. And so I think he really made me open my eyes to different kinds of intonation and different systems of intonation. And it was just super, it was so insightful with that, in that department of playing. But I think as I've been getting older, of course we still work on intonation, but I think what I appreciate about Hans so much is that he's opened my eyes to exploring different musical ideas. And the reason why I feel this way is because sometimes I'll come to lessons with different ideas and different thoughts, and of course if they're not working or they're not good, he'll call me out and he'll be like, nope, that doesn't work. But if he likes them and it's not necessarily what he was thinking initially, but he likes it, he'll actually encourage it, and he will be very open to it. And so I think what makes Hans so great is that he really encourages and really nurtures each person's personal ideas and thoughts. And so it's not, his teaching style is not like a one-size-fits-all. It's very much like for each individual, what each student needs and what each student wants. He is so good at assessing that. And so I feel like at this stage, although, he does talk about intonation sometimes, it's more of that kind of musical work that I do with Hans that has been amazing. So to actually see this progression, like through all the years too, has been just amazing to experience. And in addition to just all the cellistic things, I feel like he cares so much about each student's well-being and growth in many aspects of life, not only cello. So which is why I think for me personally, he's like my music dad. And it's funny because before his book Cello Mind, I don't think I knew that there were so many different systems of intonation. I mean, like I knew obviously like equal temperament and like, relative and melodic, but like just he goes so into detail about that, and it's crazy. Just speaking to your musical idea, then I'm curious, what draws you to certain musical conclusions when you come to the cello? Like what are some things that inspire you to choose a certain musical conviction or take on that phrase? I think it's a combination of things. First and foremost, context. So what's written in the score. Also, just knowing a lot about the other works that the composer has written. Kind of like maybe, for example, like what tendencies does he have compositionally in other works that maybe are applicable or not applicable to this particular work. So having context on his other works as well as his background also shapes my musical decisions. Also, there is a component of how I'm feeling as well. I think that's not something to disregard. Of course, I don't know if it's good to only go based on feeling. But I think it's a good combination of these different things.
Good balance.
You definitely, because you can't really disregard how you're feeling also. That's what makes music so unique, because each person plays it so differently. So I think it's definitely a combination of these things.
Well, and that's interesting because I think sometimes we are so critical of musicians, and I think we have to remind ourselves that one performance or one recording doesn't define who someone is as a musician, because that particular recording or that particular performance is just a snapshot of how they were feeling that day. So I love what you mentioned about that, because I think that's an underrated
underrated component to music, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of going back to inspiration, are there different artworks? Are there memories or family? Like, what are there other things that also inspire your work as a musician, you think?
I think traveling.
Traveling?
Actually. I had one professor like years ago when I was younger. He had mentioned something that sticks with me even today. And of course, practicing is very important. And I'm not saying not to do so. But he was saying that you have to experience life to build your color palette. You need to gain different, whether it's sources of inspiration, whether it doesn't even have to be grand things, but just experiencing different things can really build your artistic palette. Because just sitting in a room is not really going to inspire you. And so for me, especially when I travel for performances, concerts, I think experiencing these different things really builds those different colors. Because I observe, even little things like, for example, if I go to Europe and the history of this particular city or this particular building, or, it definitely provides that kind of knowledge and experience to make it applicable for my music as well. So I would say for me, a huge source of inspiration is actually traveling. I think also talking with different artists. Just to hear their thoughts, because it may not be what you're thinking, but it opens your eyes to, different perspectives. And I think as artists, it's so important to always be curious. And to always have the desire to learn and grow. So, yeah, I mean, although I'm done with my studies per se, I always feel like I'm constantly wanting to learn. And I think that's definitely important for being an artist.
Well, and I especially echo what you mentioned about just not spending all your time practicing, because I think, I mean, we both probably know colleagues from school that were very much like that, and that's fine. But again, it's like music is such a creative art form, and it requires a lot of imagination, obviously. And so we're really stifling that aspect of our life if we're just like so pigeonholed to practicing. So I love what you mentioned about just soaking it all in.
I mean, I think it's a balance. It's of course you need to put in the work, but you also need to take the time to live life too. So
Anything in particular you do personally to decompress?
Well, actually, I would say I like going to different cafes. Because I'm not a huge coffee expert, but I do like trying different drinks. I would say I like exploring like cities. So even I actually recently moved to Chicago. So I'm looking forward to exploring like museums and different, even just like parks or tourist attractions. I like exploring what the cities, have to offer. I also like to spend time with friends because I think community is always important.
Of course.
I've been, I dabbled into this like during COVID and I stopped for a little bit just because I haven't had the time recently, but I do enjoy vlogging. So it's funny, I'm a little camera shy actually, but I still enjoy vlogging. I think it's quite fun and I like the process of editing and creating something. It's like music. You get to create your own art. So I feel like vlogging is a little bit of that actually. So I enjoy doing that also, but it's tricky. Even for that, it's like sometimes I'm like, I am a little camera shy. So.
In terms of editing, like, because with this podcast, I just recently started like diving into it more. And it's fun, like you said, it's very creative, but it's also very stressful because like
there's a lot to it. Actually, there are a lot of little details, and I don't know about you, but like for me, I'm not very like proficient with editing. Like I'm very much a novice.
Sure.
So for me, because I like things, I want things to look and be a certain way. It takes me a while, and like once you go through, it's like you see something else that you want to fix. So
it's like a never-ending journey.
Exactly. So it takes a little while to edit, but I think once I get to the end product, it just feels really nice to watch it because I'm like, wow, I just created, this video.
Right. Well, and I would assume that your editing work is way more complex than what I do because mine's very kind of like service level. So I've seen some of your videos, and so it's more complex. Moving forward a little bit to a different facet of your life, you were recently appointed to the faculty at the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings at Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your teaching philosophy and also how your work as a teacher has complemented your life as a performer, and vice versa?
Oh, that's a great question. I think in general, of course, there's so much to focus on with technique and musicality, but I think when I really think about just what I want in my teaching, I think what I want is to foster and nurture each student's individual personalities and also curiosity.
Yeah.
Because I think similar to what I was mentioning earlier, even for myself, I always want to stay curious. I always want to grow and learn. And it's going to look different for every student.
Sure.
And actually, even before I get into this, I think the first thing is that it depends, first of all, on the student's level.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is like the way I approach beginners students is going to be very different from like undergraduate students. When you're very beginner, I would say, yes, I focus a lot on technique because they need that foundation in order to later on develop, their musical voice.
Yeah.
So in the very beginning stages, the foundation is so important. But I think like for the students at the McDuffie Center and, any undergraduate students, I think at that point, because they have established a foundation. And it's not that I don't talk about it. Of course I do. But it's more so to build their palette and to really tap into their curiosity for music. So I think it looks, like I said, it looks different for every student. But what I'm interested in doing is providing the tools to equip them to express what they want to express and say what they want to say. Because at the end of the day, really, as cliche as this may sound, it is a language that we all want to share and together. And honestly, I don't want them to be just literate. I want them to be fluent. And in order for them to be fluent, I need to provide them with the tools to be able to get to that point. So, for example, it's not just about, do this with your bow, do that. But it's for this phrase, if you want to do this, I always ask them, what do you want in this phrase? What do you want here? And once they tell me, then I'm like, okay, in order to do that, let's try this. Let's try that. And a lot of it is experimenting because it doesn't look the same. What works for one student may not work for the other.
Of course.
So I'll kind of approach it like, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? And then when we come to something that they feel great about, then they feel so, I can see it in their face. They feel so free to express what they are feeling inside.
Right.
So I think my goal as a teacher is really to build that and nurture that, so that they feel so powerful to just because in that way the possibilities are just endless from that point. And they really will feel free to just continue to explore. Because without that, it's gonna, definitely be hard to. So I would say, and honestly, I think that has also affected my own performance too. Because sometimes I discuss things with students, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't see things that way. Like, that's so interesting. And like, sometimes I'll even try it out myself, and I'm like, you know what? That's so, that's such a great idea. Like, and it definitely makes me think about what I'm doing very intentionally too. Because another thing I realized with teaching, it's one thing to play something, but it's a totally different thing to be able to explain what you're doing. It makes things that much more intentional, and it makes me as a performer also really think about why I'm doing certain things, not just doing what feels natural. So I guess it all kind of goes hand in hand.
And I love what you just shared, because I think it sounds like you're creating a safe space for exploration, which is, again, it builds on the idea of creating, not creating, just encouraging curiosity. Because I think oftentimes lessons can be very like one direction, where it's like the teacher is like just telling things to the student. And I love what you're sharing, because it ends up where you're hopefully teaching your students to think for themselves and to teach themselves, so that once they move on, they're hopefully able to be self-equipped and self-sufficient.
Definitely. And I think a lot of this, when I think about it too, a lot of this was influenced by Hans. Because as I was mentioning earlier, I feel like he gave me the safe space to explore. And it's something that I found so valuable that I would want my own students to experience the same thing. And that way, it's like what you said too, then it gives them room to explore and also change their minds about things. Not always just like, oh, this is the only way to do it.
Exactly, And I mean, because Hans taught my teacher in Cleveland, Melissa Kraut, and that's something during my grad school years that I really loved, was she was also very encouraging of just different ways of playing. And so, and I'm sure the same obviously with you and Northwestern, but what I loved about going to studio class every week was just seeing so many different ideas and perspectives, and she was very open and encouraging of that. So I love that. Speaking to like teaching beginners, have you done much work with beginners? Because I'm always so scared to take on beginners just because like I don't want to mess their foundation. But like, how's that been for you?
I actually have taught beginners, and I'm actually still currently teaching a few. It's very different. It is tricky. In one sense, I do feel a little bit more pressure because these are very crucial years for them. And of course, if their foundation is not built correctly, it can really affect things down the line. But at the same time, I love the feeling of starting a student from scratch. And it's really interesting to just see how they progress and how they grow. And it really actually makes me think very specifically about like how I need to accomplish certain things technically. And it's improved my way of explaining how to do certain technical things. Because a lot of times before teaching beginners, it's, it kind of, some things feel natural, and I didn't really need to think too much, so to speak. But I think just teaching beginners it forced me to really think so deeply about why I'm doing things technically, explaining how did I do this technique, rather than, oh, it just kind of happened. So, but yeah, it's very different from teaching the undergraduate students. But it's been very, very rewarding also.
And I'm curious, did you grow up on the Suzuki method, or?
I did. I think I stopped after like the third book.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, but I did do some.
Sure.
Mhm.
And so do you feel like you incorporate some of that into your own teaching with beginners, or?
Yes and no. I would say some of them we stayed in the Suzuki method longer, but some of them actually I just kind of adjusted it according to their needs.
Sure.
But yeah, it really depends on the student.
Yeah. And one last thing before we move
Sure.
on. Do you just start with the bow hold for most beginners or all beginners? Or how?
I would say I kind of have to work on each hand separately.
Right.
But like, for example, the student that I have now, like she does have some basics, but right now a lot of stuff that I'm working on is more her right arm. And so that's kind of what I've been focusing on. But I think it's because, especially when they're so young, it's already hard enough for us to think about 20 different things. But for beginners, it's, especially at a young age, you have to break it down to bite-sized pieces.
Sure.
So I really kind of start from whatever I feel like needs most work and then kind of go from there. It's a lot of it, honestly, is it changes depending on the student and really what they need, because each student has different needs. So
yeah, of course. All right. I want to move on to something a little bit lighter. Our quarter note questions segment.
I was thinking about this actually. Yeah. I love the name of the quarter note question. I thought that's so cute. I loved it.
It'll be like a mildly paced with all these questions. So I'm really curious as to how you answer these. First one, Chicago or Philly?
Can I say neither?
Oh, really?
No, I love both cities. And obviously they have they both have a special place in my heart. Yeah. Just the memories and the experiences that I built in each place are so precious to me. However, I feel like in terms of like location, I would say New York actually.
Okay. So I should have said New York, Philly, or Chicago. Okay.
Yeah, I love New York. I think the music in New York is just flourishing.
Yeah.
I grew up here, and so it's really home for me. And I love trying different places, and really New York has just so many places to explore as well. Yeah. So I would say overall, New York.
Yeah. You know, a friend of mine told me that there's like a study where there's so many restaurants in New York City that you could go to a new restaurant every day for the rest of your life and still like find a new or something like that.
I can believe that. Yeah, I mean, there are just almost too many.
There's never too many.
True.
One country you hope to visit someday?
Oh. I love going to Europe in general. I would say one country's France.
You haven't been to France yet?
I've been to like Savoy, which is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's like the southern part of France where the French Alps are.
Okay.
But like Paris, like that type of city.
Sure.
Honestly, anywhere in Europe, I always love exploring. But for the food, Japan. Yeah.
You've been to Japan much?
I haven't been to Japan.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, so you just want... Okay.
Yeah, so I would love to try the food in Japan.
Yeah.
Because I love Japanese cuisine.
Yeah.
So, but I think in terms of history and just in general, I always love going to Europe. So I would say anywhere in Europe.
Yeah. I mean, that's like where a lot of our great composers breathe their air. So, yeah, I mean... Europe is... Yeah. Favorite Korean food?
Oh, these are all hard quarter note questions. There's too much to choose from.
You need a half rest?
I I love bulgogi.
Okay.
I love naengmyeon. I love mandu. I love 된장찌개. 김치찌개, 미역국.
Okay. Do you make your own at all?
I'm not a very good cook, to be honest. I think, I would love to learn how to make those dishes, honestly, but recently I just haven't had time to cook.
That's fair.
But yeah, I love Korean food, so it's a little hard to choose.
Do your fellow quartet members also love Korean food?
I would say so.
Okay, good. It's always good if everyone likes the same kind of foods.
Actually, what's your favorite?
Yeah, I would say kimchi jjigae. There was like 1 month a couple years ago where I made kimchi. I literally just ate kimchi jjigae that I made for like a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like, yeah.
Are you like a creature of habit?
Sort of, yeah. But I was like going through a phase of just wanting kimchi because it was like really cold, and I was like,
yeah,
this will help.
I mean, it's really good, so I don't blame you.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny because I would like try different meats in it. Like one time I put like bacon.
Oh,
it was interesting.
What's your favorite meat to put in kimchi jjigae?
Just pork, probably.
Oh,
just any pork. Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah,
classic.
Yeah. Samgyeopsal is also good to put in it.
That's good too. Yeah.
It's gonna be about Korean food the rest of the. Actually, speaking to that, favorite meal after a performance.
It actually depends because sometimes actually after concerts I'm not that hungry. Yeah. I think part of it, maybe it's the adrenaline.
Yeah.
Part of it is I'm so in the zone that like my mind is not really on food.
Yeah.
But sometimes like if I, let's say, didn't eat much that day, then favorite meal, I would say anything lighter, honestly. Like a salad or nothing too heavy because normally when concerts end, it's pretty late.
Yeah.
So I would say anything lighter, like a salad or some kind of protein or something.
What's your pre-concert routine then? Because like I think musicians are very pessimistic about that sometimes, like where they don't want to eat too much. So I'm curious what your day looks like before a performance.
I definitely don't eat much before I perform.
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable to perform on a full stomach.
Right.
I would say for me, I like to drink something warm and have hand warmers because I'm always cold. Yeah. It doesn't matter if the backstage is warm. I'm just always cold.
Right.
And I have a banana. I don't know if it's a psychological thing, but for me, it provides some stamina.
Right.
And I think in general, pre-performance, I don't like to like talk a lot and like socialize a lot. I like to kind of be in my own space. So actually, even with the quartet, I just kind of I just kind of like to be in my own zone.
Okay.
And so it gives me the time and the space to focus and not be distracted.
Are the others just like goofing off right before a concert?
I don't know about that, but I don't know. It's I think in general I like to just have more quiet. Because also that's my way of calming myself down. Because I actually don't like, I've never tried beta blockers and I'm not wanting to try beta blockers if possible. So I try to find more natural ways if I can to cope with my nerves.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say generally those types of things.
Interesting. First thing you reach for in the morning?
I wish I had a better answer, but I guess my phone.
Okay.
Except, but the first thing I do, I don't like to go on social media when I wake up. That's for sure. I think what I'll usually do is, first the reason why I said phone too is because I don't like to sleep in silence, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I always play music when I sleep.
Okay.
So I'll reach for my phone to turn it off, but also I guess the first thing I'll do is check my schedule for the day. I do like to have a schedule and kind of like a regimen. So it gives me peace of mind just to see it visually first thing in the morning. So
are you listening to classical music when you go to sleep, or?
I would say more lyrical classical things.
Okay.
Yeah. Nothing upbeat.
Yeah. That's interesting because I also don't like to sleep in silence, but I usually have like YouTube or Netflix on for just kind of back white noise.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Favorite brand of cello strings?
Depends on the cello I'm playing on. The only reason why I say this is my quartet knows this too, but there's been a phase of just me borrowing cellos.
Yeah.
And so as you know already, the strings that you use really depends on what the cello likes.
Yeah.
I think in general, I would say Larsen. But it depends on the cello.
Yeah.
So even the cello I'm playing on now, the Yargar fortes actually sound best.
Okay.
So I would say whatever strings work for the cello.
Yeah, I also use Yargar, but I haven't tried the forte, so...
They're actually kind of hard to get.
Oh, really?
The D string in particular. The A string's pretty accessible, but the D string's kind of hard to find. But
is it that in demand? Or...
I guess so. But I've been liking those, but I think I also like the Larsen Il Canon, Warm and Broad, and also the Magna Course. So I would say those, if I had to narrow it down.
Sure. And I know Versum has been kind of like a thing for people. So
some people, it's a love it or hate it, at least from when I asked my friends. But when I tried it, maybe it's the cello I was trying it on, I didn't love it, but they seem like great strings. So maybe it works on another cello.
Right. Glass half full or half empty?
I would say right now half full. I think, of course, I have my times when I would say half empty. But I think in general, I try to say half full.
Good. Yeah. Early morning or late night practice?
Early morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I actually, I think because I feel like I'm the most productive in the mornings. And I get more tired as the day progresses, and especially with, activities going on during the day. I would say early morning.
Just, hammering out your scales first thing in the morning?
I should say yes. Recently, maybe not. But just having the full energy in the morning is something that I think is good for my practice. So,
I mean, they say that your brain works the best in the morning, so I guess taking a walk or taking a nap?
Taking a walk.
Really?
I think I don't love taking naps in general. If I do, because I'm just so tired, I'll make it really short.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like it makes me lose focus a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and I like taking walks because it gets me out of my headspace a little bit, or it makes me think deeply about other things.
Yeah.
So it's nice to get fresh air.
Yeah. Well, and also, I don't know, like, I don't like taking naps because oftentimes I end up taking too long of a nap, and then like I wake up with a headache, and it just ends up being very counterproductive to what I was.
That's happened to me as well. Yes.
Yeah. Most nerve-wracking performance experience?
I would say when I performed Bach Chaconne in Finland.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful space, actually. It was in this huge library in Helsinki, but I think it's just because the piece itself is so terrifying. I mean, I love it, which is why I chose to arrange it and play it.
Oh, you arranged it yourself?
I arranged it, and it's funny, there's a story. I know these are quarter note questions, but...
You can take the whole note.
But I actually arranged Bach Chaconne when I was sick with COVID.
Okay.
And this was during a summer at Meadowmount. And I came home because I was sick with COVID. And I was just in bed. And I felt so unproductive that I was like, oh, well, Bach Chaconne is a piece that I've always loved. And it goes along with my passion project, which is violin pieces for the cello. And so I was like, well, why don't I arrange the Bach Chaconne? And so I was arranging it while I was sick with COVID. And I go to learn it, and it's really difficult. I mean, I think it's probably, I can say, the hardest piece I've had to play thus far. And I will say it's terrifying because, first of all, people have so many different opinions on Bach to begin with.
Sure.
But it's also a violin piece, so that makes it even more subjective. And cellistically, it's so awkward.
Yeah.
And it's so transparent that I think because of all of these reasons, it just felt so terrifying.
Yeah.
But it was also really, it's interesting. It was terrifying, but also really rewarding to perform at the same time. But yeah, I would say that was really nerve-wracking.
How long ago was this?
This was about 1.5 years ago.
So sometime last year?
It was February of 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking to that, I feel like for all musicians, especially string players, playing Bach is like you're just, it feels like you're going on stage like naked, musically speaking, you know, it's like very like everyone can just see everything about you. So.
Exactly. And there are so many like ways of playing it that it's scary.
Yeah. But actually I think that's what makes it so beautiful is like, you know, obviously, you know, you've seen the Mary Magdalena, her what's the word? Her the manuscripts,
of course.
Or Anna Magdalena, sorry, not Mary. Anyways, and you see that like there's no markings on it in terms of like dynamics or tempo, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I think Bach really trusted the performer to come up with their own interpretation based on the harmonies that he created. So
definitely.
I think in a way it's like there's no wrong way to play Bach almost. Favorite airline to fly with a cello?
United. Yeah, actually, well, I think for the most part I've been flying United and they've been really accommodating with the cello. So I'll say United.
What's your least favorite?
American.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I've had some decent experiences, but I've had experiences where they want the cello upside down, where there are delays with the flight constantly. It's just it's not my favorite.
Favorite Bach suite?
To play or to listen?
Is it different for both?
Yes.
Okay. Well, now you have to spill the beans on both.
Okay, well, to listen, I would say Bach 6. To play, I would say Bach 4.
Oh, really? 4? Okay. Why 4?
I think it's quite a charming suite. And actually, for me, I love the movements after the prelude a lot.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't like the prelude, but I love the elegance and the charm of the other movements.
Yeah.
So I would say 4 to play, 6 to listen.
Nice. Hide and C or D?
C.
C?
I mean, I love both. They're such great works, but I think hide and C for me personally, I feel like has a lot of charm and character to it. Not that not the hide and D doesn't, but maybe it's just a personal preference. I like C.
Yeah. C's like the closest we have to like a Mozart concerto, honestly. Like, not that D major isn't Mozart like, but I don't know. Yeah, like you said, C's. Yeah. One cellist, or excuse me, favorite cellist from the 20th century.
Can I say Lynn Harrell? I know he was in 21st century too, but I would say Lynn Harrell.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, his playing is just remarkable and so vocal. And actually, just having had the chance to be mentored by him, I really saw that even more. So maybe that's why I have even more of an affinity for his playing.
Great choice. One cellist, dead or alive, you would like to meet?
Actually, the cellist that I wanted to meet, I met.
Oh, okay.
His name is Andreas Brantelid.
Okay.
And I met him actually when I went to Finland last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely love his playing. So when I met him, I was completely starstruck.
Are there any cellists that have passed away that you wish you could meet?
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
Rostropovich, Feuermann, Piotr. I mean, you name it.
Yeah. One composer, dead or alive, you would like to meet?
Brahms.
And
I think the reason is that I would like to ask him why he didn't write more for the cello. Why he didn't write a concerto for the cello. More sonatas. I would want to know why.
He wrote a lot for like almost every instrument though. So I think he was kind of like exploring all.
Maybe. I'm so curious what a cello concerto would sound like, or another sonata even.
Yeah.
And of course he has amazing violin and piano works. But I would just be really curious to know.
Yeah. I mean, he obviously loved the cello because even in his symphonies, he gave some of the most incredible lines. So great. That was fun. This has been lovely, Sydney. Before we close, can you share with us and our audience any final words of wisdom, especially to the younger ones that may be trying to cultivate their own unique passion in the world of music?
I think it's very much in line with when I was talking about what I want as a performer and as an artist, and also what I want to encourage in my students. But I think it's to never stop exploring, to always stay curious, and just enjoy the process. I think so much of this field nowadays is, filled with anxiety, honestly. And but at the end of the day, we're doing music because we absolutely love it. And I think we have to really never forget that. So I think each person's path is so unique and so individual. But I think it's so important to always discover, always search.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Sydney, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you nothing but continued love and joy in the world of music as you move forward.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is fun.